and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. Now this is the wrap-up series, and the wrap-up series will have every ship with every build that I can imagine. Several things to note. Number one, all of these ships are purely built for PvE. They are built from the perspective of a single player. They may have techniques listed for glass cannon or offense or defensive run when you're pairing them with the team, but they don't necessarily work when it comes to doing it solo. So although these are mentioned for solo, some of them are team runs. You have to be very careful about what I say. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at each and every class of ship. Even though some of these classes can't be used for actual combat, I'm actually going to explain how you can use them in a simple combat situation. What is their functionality? Now, the capital vessels that have just come out, the capital ships, the freighters, are something altogether brand new. With people breaking into T10, these are going to be built and they're going to be used, and they do have a PvE particular usage. With over 300,000 health, the ability to use modules, and let me just open this quickly. I don't have maximum skills on this as yet. I will definitely get to that point soon. They don't really have that much of a power grid to start with. As you can see, 8 megawatts, so you can't really augment them too heavily. You're going to have to always keep them defended well, and as you can see, the capacitor can really burn very quickly. So anything that they're going to rely on is going to be something that is non-primary based. They're going to rely on very low power consumption. They're going to rely on stealth more than anything else. And if you want to fly it and use it in PvE situations for the tank in the front line, you're going to be using support to hold up this vessel. Now understand, this has a small amount of resistance similar to that of a station. So it will take quite some time for any type of enemy to break it, no matter what it is. Even if there's big enemies hitting you at 20,000 a hit every 10 seconds or even 20 seconds, it doesn't make a difference. 20,000 a hit and count it for 3 hits in a minute, that's 60,000. That gives you 6 minutes on the ship's aggro before it will go down. That makes it a good ship to use to hold aggro in dangerous missions like a Dead Space. It also has some of the best module placements to be able to be used to pick up loot from those activities. So if you do have one of these, they're very good for transporting goods around the systems, and they're going to be very good for holding massive amounts of cargo. You can't really augment it to move too fast. The power grid is really limited on them, and even with the complete research pack, if I am correct, you can just barely fit on powerful modules. So it's limited to low-end modules, it's limited to low-end resistance, and that is all that you have on it. They're going to be very resistant, and that is the only key point in usage. Now when it comes to using them in PvE, these are the things you need to know about. Now obviously I'm going through all the ships to start with, and then I'm going to continue running up with everything. If you are using them in PvE in actual ratting situations, try to keep them cloaked and try to keep them hidden as much as possible. So keeping it cloaked will allow you to stay hidden from most surveillance. Also, scanning it won't really give it away with the cloaking device active. There are some ways to break cloaking, but obviously if you've placed it correctly, it won't really get affected. And with all of this, what you can do is harvest tons of resources and get away. Now I'm not sure if it limits you to the allowance of those modules. If it does, then I'm really sorry. I will be testing out one of these ships in a few weeks time. I'll give it a little bit of a run, see how it moves, how slow it is. Actually, I already know how slow it is, and I'll just give you an overall usage of it if you were just having one for show. Now overall, if you use this here for ratting, it is hours and hours worth of ratting stored into a single place. You can go invisible, and that's about the best part about the ship, the fact that you can hide your loot. And once your loot is hidden, nobody can steal it. So hidden loot is something perfect. You can hide the ship in the middle of nowhere, nobody's going to find it, and even if they scan for it, they're not going to pick up its signature. Cloaking devices are the king when it comes to this current matter. So that is its only function for PvE. It's either to hold the aggro for a few minutes to buy you some time, or it is to literally pick up all your loot and run around with it. If you are going to use it to hold aggro, it must be supported and repaired as fast as possible. Okay, moving up to the next class of vessel. This isn't an individual build video, this is just the overall. When it comes to your modules, make sure that you look at that power grid very carefully. You have 6 slots and you have 8 gigs to the power grid. If I'm correct, when you add everything on, it's an additional 75%. Add that on, it only takes it up to about 12, no, it'll take it just above 12, maybe about 13 gigawatts on the power grid. It's not enough for you to do anything. Just be very careful with that. It doesn't give you massive excess power. Now, battleships are something that we are used to already. We've been playing with them for the past few months, and we've seen people running around in them, and they're overall a very good heavy assault vessel. The place where they fall short is they aren't very good against small ships. However, some ships do have the additional bonuses that make them useful against small vessels, such as the Armageddon or the Dominix. The Dominix is capable of holding hordes of drones and using them in sequence with a very good target rate. So if you pair them up correctly, they can be absolutely devastating. Now, with all of that said, these are the problems with the big ships. Big ships of this class are very hard to really break when it comes to their total amount of armor. They rate close to the 60 to 100,000 mark in total armor, and once augmented with your research and your fittings, they can obviously break that 100,000 mark easy. If you pair them up with the right modules, they can break the million mark for about 10 seconds. That's obviously only through the damage reduction system. I'm forgetting what its exact name is, but nonetheless, what it will do is it will give you a million for 10 seconds. It means it will slow down the damage that you take for that first 10 seconds. They're good for you to buy time, and they can complete most missions solo. So if you have the right vessel from this class, which is generally 1 or 2 of these ships, the rest aren't in that same class, you will be able to complete most missions solo. The next ship from these that is a really unbelievably optimized is the fact that the next class of ships in here that is really optimized is the faction class of ships. Now, the faction ships are really special, to say the very least. The faction ships have more power than any other regular vessel that you can get your hands on. The Rattlesnake, the Nightmare, the Macarial are all fantastic. However, the specialist when it comes to taking out small ships from them would be the Vindicator. The Vindicator with a low range weapon system and its high range Weber fire capabilities, with its high range additional effects from its ship bonuses, will literally stop any ship from getting away from you. This will allow you to do massive damage across a wide range of distance. So this is one of the best ways to use this ship. It is a close range, heavy hitting combat ship. It will do well for most encounters. Now, there is the only one from these ships that is really that particularly ganded up to do all of this. Also, the Belgon is useful, but it's more of a vampire than a stopping ship. It can't really help you that much in PvE. Okay, let's move on to the next class of ships, industrial ships. Although industrial ships are not highly useful in combat, 1 or 2 vessels are useful due to their higher than regular defensive capabilities. Putting them in a defensive mode and running them into your PvE activities will allow you to use them for bait. They have a very high tracking signature, and they will attract more attention than most ships. Keeping them with as big a signature radius as possible will pull people towards it, or pull anything towards the ship, and you can always use it to tank a lot of damage before it goes down. That is your nearest combat and your humpback combat. Now those two vessels will really tank a lot of damage, but they will give you an edge later on in combat when it comes to fighting in massive waves, for example in a dead space. The fact that they can go into that tanky mode, which makes them unbelievably useful. You can use them to hold the aggression in the start of a wave. Jumping in with your full team after it has already had full aggro locked onto it, you can then wipe out the team without putting up too big of a signature on your vessels. The vessel will take massive damage, there is a guarantee on it, but it will be able to tank at a much higher rate due to its defensive mode reducing damage. Now in general, the nearest combat is capable of standing up to battle cruisers, and the humpback is capable of standing up to battleships. That just tells you exactly where they're placed. They are that powerful. However, the one warning that I will give you is do not overestimate the defensive capability. They still can be destroyed quite easily if you allow things to go too far. Okay, moving on. The other usage of these ships is obviously to deploy strategic placements, and that is your capital dispersal ships and your transport vessels. Although these two are a very important factor, they are not useful in PvE combat. They are only useful for picking up some resources, and even in that factor, they aren't the best in the class for picking up objects from your PvE rating. That would be better suited to a lower class vessel that I will be going to a little bit later. Okay. Shuttles are a non-combatant vessel. The shuttles are a very useful component for you to use to scan sites. They do not aggro on pirates, and that allows you to see what is going through in a dead space, for example. Moving through with the ship, you can actually land beaching points and staging points within activities. So if you jump into, say for example, a dead space, you can place one of the shuttles at a 250 mark away from the midpoint, jump in and instantly jump towards it. This will give you that massive opportunity to ensure that you do not get taken out when you jump into a dangerous situation. This is very helpful for a lot of how would I say this here? This is very useful for a lot of important things within the game, such as your high-end missions, Bad Hair Day, for what is a map, Friends by Blood. All those high T10 missions can be done very easily using this method. Pulling them out to a good enough radius from the center will allow you to have that defense. They also allow you one additional massive situational advantage. Using them to gather information will allow you to tell what opponents are close by. They have a very fast jump speed and can move through gates really quickly. That makes them one of the best for collecting pieces in between missions. They can also be kept on your main ship as a midway point so that you can jump between locations while you are busy with a mission. So for example, Bad Hair Day has its check-off points in between. You can always use a Naga or a Macaria or any one of them with this vessel in its cargo hold. It will not occupy too much of cargo space, and you still will have enough space to actually pick up everything else. Although this is a possibility, it would be suggested that you keep it in a station nearby while taking on the mission in case of any problems like a lag out and the ship being destroyed. After all, components which fall in space are generally not replaced by the game. Alright, so let's go on to the next one, battle cruisers. The battle cruisers are a mid-form type of vessel, capable of taking on small and large ships. They have inefficiencies from large ships and they have efficiencies from smaller ships. They have a lower movement speed than a lot of the smaller ships, and they have a massive firepower similar to that of the larger vessels. They are the optimal firepower vessel for most players. They give you a balance between defense and assault, and they do have enough speed to be resistant to battleships. That means that they only need to fend off against the smaller vessels with a larger power grid and the same usage of medium weapons. Medium weapons is used for the majority of the class. However, some exceptions within this class are the specialty ships, which will allow you to take on large weapons, or they will allow you to take on the slot role of logistics or defense. These will allow you to take on harder missions for a longer and more prolonged battle. They also will give you an advantage in most forms of combat. So there is one thing to note about these vessels. Battleships are absolutely phenomenal. They have the best performance from any vessel that I have used so far, including the faction battleships. The faction battleships do perform nicely, and they do well against other battleships, but they do severely lack against the smaller ships. If the smaller ship does have enough speed and you aren't using a defense capable ship like the Vindicator or the Balgon, you will suffer heavy losses when a battle cruiser comes up against your battleship. Obviously, those two are exceptions. The Balgon has the massive energy drain that can literally drain your cap in a matter of seconds. They can use large slot weapons, which can affect you on close combat. That is the only other warning on it, because those weapons do have an effect against you. However, if you play the rules of the game in your favor, a Nosferatu can always be used on any other ship except for the Balgon. So if you use a Nosferatu, you will be able to drain the energy from the larger ship without it bringing you down to zero. Although your impact will be minimum, it will keep you stable and allow you to fight for a longer period if you ever do need to fight those vessels in close range combat. Okay. Now, with all of this said, there are a few very special things to note about this. The command vessels are something that I haven't really dealt with, and they do have special command burst slots. Now, command burst modules are used to give you an advantage in combat, and I will be going through that when I go through them one at a time for the specific builds. Okay, moving on to the next class of vessels, we have the cruiser class vessels. The cruiser class vessels are very similar to the battleship class vessels, except for the point where defense is a massive difference. The defense of the larger vessel is at least triple that of the lower class vessel. The speed is at least a third of the speed advantage, so it does not make up for that difference in size. The cost to make these ships is generally very low, and they are usable from a very early point in the game. They have high defensibility, they have high usability, and that makes these ships unbelievable weapons of destruction. So please note that this is one of the best vessels for you to use if you are ever going up against anybody in the form of combat. This is one of the best ships to take on the battlefront when it comes to wars because of their low replacement costs. Some battle cruisers have low replacement costs, and although that is the situation, I'm making such a mistake. Battleships and battle cruisers have a higher cost than cruisers, and the cruiser is the most efficient ship for its class, since it uses a mid-tier weapon system with mid-tier defensive systems, giving it a fair amount of stay in combat. They may not be able to stack up against the heavy assaults from the larger ships or be able to stack up against their power usage, but they definitely have the upper end of speed on their side. If you augment them correctly, they can be almost uncatchable by battle cruisers. One or two battle cruisers are the exception to that situation. Alright, now when it comes to it, there is also one other thing to note. There are three specialty classes within the cruisers. There are your logistics, your defensive, and your covert ops classes. Now I'm making that a separate one. I'm not going to touch on the assault class vessels. Assault class vessels don't really have that much of a severe edge, but the covert ops is something really severe. Covert ops vessels can use covert ops modules, and that allows them to stay invisible while in motion. This makes them unbelievably useful for reconnaissance and for surprise assaults. So running teams in large covert ops fleets will definitely trump having to fight the long-term battle. Their small size means that lock time is increased, giving you more chance to deal damage to an opponent before they can turn against you. Now, when it comes to those vessels, they are mainly a PvP format battleship. You can use them in PvE to get around in things like a dead space. If you go invisible and fly away fast enough from the center, you can use it to get a waypoint into the fight, and you can still use it for combat, unlike a shuttle. They also are very good for the current meta. Disappearing on the map immediately the moment someone tries to jump close to you is something that will definitely be useful. The lock timers are not as fast as your invisibility timer, so if you go invisible against large ships, you will be able to get away regardless of what they try. And the covert ops modules have a very fast cloaking time in less than 0.9 seconds. That means you're locking on a target and they're disappearing is almost about the same time. The disappearing is more than likely to win because your screen will only show the target with the delay of a second or so. And once that happens, you have to click on and do the next action while they simply have to hit cloak. Okay, next class, destroyers. Destroyers are a much smaller unit. They rely on heavy speed to get away and apply damage. They are ineffective in large-scale combat. Anything above T7 will almost instantly obliterate these vessels. Although they are capable of fighting small anomalies, they are not useful in dead spaces or any type of high-end game activity. Their usage may be for logistics for some purposes, but they still are highly inefficient against any other ship from the higher class for most PvE. You can use them to try and take on some smaller class missions and make smaller earnings, but that is about it. They do not have a high usage case scenario. I will not be trying to make a high usage case scenario for these vessels. They do have PvP usage in the fact that they can stop ships and with the right augmentation can be almost untouchable by other vessels. Now here comes one of the most unique class ships, the frigates. The frigates have a severe advantage when it comes to speed, and the speed advantage does give them an edge in combat. However, they fall short against most combat when it comes to long term, and using these for combat will be extremely tedious. I give you that as a good warning against using them, because using this particular class of ship will mean that you will have prolonged battles for extenuated amounts of time. Now, they do have other purposes like logistics. There are several classes within this that are very good for transporting your materials. There is the interceptor class, and the next one which is very useful here is the covert ops. The covert ops is one of the best ships from this class of vessel, considering they have a massive amount of storage. The storage can be used to pick up items in the form of ratters. So if you have a team, they are very good to store items, and they are one of the most efficient at picking up materials. Plus the fact that they are covert ops means they can stay invisible and out of the range of anybody from attacking you. Interceptors do have the ability to take on some vessels depending on the matchup of a ship. So if you are taking on, say for example, a battle cruiser with an interceptor, there is a chance for you to actually beat the battle cruiser. Depending on your mid slots and their mid slots, if they manage to immobilize you or slow you down, it can definitely lead to your loss. But if they do not have the right modules on, you can simply rip through them over a prolonged period of time, since they cannot get through gates and they cannot warp away from you with the right modules equipped. Okay, I think I might be missing something. Yes, stealth bombers are a highly efficient large ship tackle vessel. Their large weapon systems allow you to apply massive amounts of damage against larger vessels. These weapons have a big advantage on these small vessels, since you will not be expecting the damage output that they can apply. If one shot from these ships hits you at full volley, it will instantly hurt your vessel. They can take out the shields of most armor vessels instantaneously with a single volley, and a full fleet of this will definitely be able to take down a battleship. So a full fleet is quite a big number. That's 10 players at the minimum. If you are going to make a massive command squad with these vessels, they can be really dangerous in war situations. Their quick speed makes them almost impossible to lock unless you are fighting in close combat, and if you get too close to the fleet, they can rip through your ship at a very fast rate with their weapon systems. They generally use large torpedoes, and this is done at a massive reduction to the cost of the power grid. It also allows them to do a large amount of damage, and they have a special assault mode that can really overdo the damage that they can apply. They are very good for PvP, but they are not very good for PvE. Now, when it comes to building any ship, please remember the following things. As I have mentioned them, you have to think about each class of vessel. Now, I know that it seemed like I did skip over this, but I am getting into it right now. When it comes to any type of vessel, remember where I said it applies. If it's weak against small vessels, you must know that you have to keep some distance. If you get too close to a small vessel, they fall under target radius and it's impossible for you to get them. Certain weapon systems do hit even close range targets, but other weapons do not. For example, railguns. The close range snub-nose railguns are very effective on close range targets. However, with the speed of very small ships, they cannot hit them. Even triple webbed or double webbed, the ships do not take enough of a reduction for you to apply proper damage. The damage will take too long to apply, and the ship will be able to heal out most of it. It will take 4 to 5 Weber fires at the maximum class to actually stop these small vessels to apply heavy damage. So that is one of the things that makes them really difficult to deal with. The fact that the big ships need so much for the small items. If you are going to use a big vessel for a solo PvP, the general idea is to mix your modules correctly so that you can use them efficiently in combat. You must be able to take on your own class of vessel, hold on against their fire, and actually kill all the other ships. That is one of the things that is most important when it comes to these class of vessels, and you must know which ships to keep alive and which ships to destroy. Okay, so that's going to be about it for my general breakdown on the ships, and that is all that I have to say about breaking down on how to choose what to do. I only spoke about the capital ships in such a big amount because of the way that they are special and they just launched. I will be going through with them in a little bit more detail, maybe down the line. To be honest, there is a lot of ships to go, and if you count this first class, I'm not even going to be done with this in the next few days. So I hope that you all do enjoy the long stay of content that's about to come out. This will most likely be my last stay of content that's ever released. So I hope that you all do enjoy, and I will see you all in the next one.